Yeah, I remember making a bit of a slip up, something I
Yeah.
said, and I was like, oh, and like liked working with people or stuff like that. And she was like, oh, Jonty, you just have to do medicine.
Well, a very warm welcome to you, Jonty. Thank you for joining me this morning. I'm really looking forward to our discussion.
Mm-hmm.
So to start off, can you tell me a bit about where you've come from and what it is you're up to at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm from New Zealand originally. So I did my applications from New Zealand from high school. So I went through all my high school years in New Zealand. But now I'm studying at Monash University in my second year of medicine. And yeah, just really loving that so far. Obviously moved over for university, which I'm sure we can talk about a bit. But yeah, no, it's been a very good move so far.
Awesome. So how has that transition been from moving away from home to Australia?
Yeah, there were points of it that were tricky,
Yeah.
but it's been a lot smoother than I thought. I think being from New Zealand, it's pretty close to Australia, so going home isn't necessarily difficult. I mean, I know people from, like, for example, Mildura, and like
Yeah.
their trip home is just about as long as mine. So it's not too far, which helps. But there was definitely a point where I was like, wow, I'm like 18, 19. I'm actually by myself in a new country that I don't know anyone.
It's pretty daunting.
Yeah, when I first moved over, that was pretty daunting. But honestly, I just got kind of swept away by, being in medicine and meeting so many new people. I mean, I'm at like a residential college at Monash, so I got the chance to meet a lot of new people. And by the time I'd kind of made my friends and stuff, I felt pretty warm and pretty at home. So it's
Amazing.
been a fairly smooth transition.
Yeah, right.
Mm.
And so you said it was like fairly lonely coming over. Were you the only one from your school that came over?
Yeah, that was, I guess, what the good thing was as well. For some reason, from my year group at school, quite a few people chose to move to Melbourne.
Right.
No one to Monash, though, but quite a few to Melbourne University. So I stay in contact with them as much as I can. And that definitely helps knowing that I had that kind of connection with home that I kind of catch up with. Like when I need to while I'm here.
And have you seen any of them since?
Yeah, I still see them fairly often. There's about like 3 of my really good mates who moved over with me to Melbourne Uni. I actually went in and saw them the other day. And actually people come over from New Zealand as well to visit every now and then, and I'll catch up with them. So yeah, I still do have that connection with home for sure.
So the residential college you're in, what's been the experience of living alone, like actually having your own space and being away from your family a bit more?
I think like you come into like the O week, like the welcome week at college or those like residential halls, and that very much takes up a lot of your time. So I didn't think about it much then. But it was kind of in the weeks after that when I started university, when like college started quieting down a bit, and I was like, wow, I'm actually by myself here now. Like this is actually real.
Yeah.
College is good. It definitely in some ways distracts you from like being away from home because there's so many friends and stuff around you. But yeah, I think it's important to very much stay in contact with home and stuff while you're away. And that keeps you feeling like, yeah, I'm still connected and stuff, just calling every weekend or even more than that sometimes. Yeah.
One of the things I thought about with res, I'm not personally on res, but I was thinking, would you feel like you're kind of stuck in the uni space? Like you can't really get away from class and the same people. Does that ever feel a bit suffocating, or do you kind of enjoy having that constant? Like obviously you've got friends in res, so it's a bit better, but does it feel like that ever?
Yeah, it's a very good question. There's really the positives and negatives of being on res or in a college. I think the big positives, obviously, there's lots of like new people you're always meeting. I think I've developed so much socially from being in a college versus just, being in high school and stuff like that. And like being around your friends all the time, there's something to be said about, how fun that is. But as you say, I was literally talking about this to someone the other day, especially as an international student, like you can't really step away in that whole, it's like a bubble really, because like you're all living together 24/7. And sometimes you get so caught up in that bubble. And if you, live down the road or you live in Geelong or something, you can kind of step away for the weekend. Whereas like, it's a bit harder for me to do that. So just finding ways to get out of that university space, get out of the college/hall, I definitely recommend for people who are moving over, even if it's just like going to the beach for a trip or go to stay at your mate's house for the weekend. Just anything you can do. Yeah.
Particularly with medicine being quite a small cohort, and you're with the same people in the same classes, where, you know, in a science degree or an arts degree, you're sort of 800-900 students, and every semester your class might be changing. So I guess there's that added aspect where you're with the same people all the time. Yeah. Is there something else besides uni that does get you out of that shell a little bit, out of that bubble?
Yeah, I mean, I've been so taken up with college and uni. I'm also a residential advisor at my college this year. So part of my job is being at the college as well, which makes things difficult. I really enjoy skiing, so I've got away a couple times skiing this year with my friends, and that was a really good way to disconnect.
Whereabouts was that?
I went to Hotham a couple weekends ago.
Really good.
Oh, it was like raining.
Okay.
So the snow got washed away, but it was still good fun just going with my friends. Outside of that, I also play like some sports over the road at Monash. So that's a good way to just kind of, I guess, hang out with some friends and disconnect. And I go to the gym outside of university as well. So, you know, day to day, I do get outside of the college and university, but I don't necessarily completely separate myself, which is sometimes what you need. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, interesting. Well, we can dig into that a little bit more towards the end as we talk about medicine a little bit more. But to start our discussion around high school a little bit more, I'm not particularly well versed with how the New Zealand high school system works and how different it is from BCE. But can you tell me a bit about high school and how your year 11, 12 year went?
Yeah. My high school was, I think, quite similar to what it is in Australia in some ways. The whole process of getting into medicine is quite different, and the views around it, which I'm sure we'll talk about. But yeah, my year 11 and 12, or it's actually 12, 13 in New
12, 13,
which is quite funny. That takes a bit of getting used to actually when you move over. Were maybe not as intense as others who might have like gone to medicine in Australia and stuff, just because you don't know how like competitive it is really. So I was going in a little bit blind. But the schooling system's a bit different. We do NCA rather than VCE. Well, I personally didn't, but that's the main curriculum in New Zealand. It's similar to VCE, where you do like the internal kind of examinations, or SACs as you guys call them, for some of your grade, and then you do the external end of year examinations for part of your grade as well. So that system's quite similar to VCE. I personally did Cambridge A levels, which is very different, where you do everything at the end of the year in your exams, and your year 11 grade, or like Australian year 11 grade, is 50% of your total grade at the end of high school.
Wow. All right.
So it's somewhat similar to IB in that way, where it's like the last 2 years of your high school are very important to come together to give you that final grade. Yeah.
Well, what led you to the decision to do Cambridge A levels instead of the NCA?
Yeah, so you do have both of those options. Not like every school in New Zealand will offer Cambridge A levels. So my school is somewhat unique in that way. You can kind of look at it as almost the IB system in Australia, where there's kind of those two different pathways, VC, IB, you can take. With my school, A-levels were very much seen as being, I guess, the option if you wanted to look going internationally for university. Looking back on it, I don't think doing NCA would have made much of a difference, but I guess that was just the general kind of vibe my school that people had, which might have been a bit of a misconception. Anyway, so I did A-levels because I did think about wanting to apply to Australia, or I did end up applying to the UK as well. So that's, I guess, why I ended up going down that pathway.
All right. So overall, like your experience of years 12 and 13, what was it like balancing study and the other activities you were doing? Can you tell me a little bit about what it was that you spent your time doing outside of just schoolwork?
Yeah, absolutely. Looking back, I can't believe how busy I guess I was.
Also busy. I've got that as well. But how do you fit that much in?
Yeah, and then I got to first year uni, and I thought I'd be even more busy, but actually, it wasn't really the case. Those last high school years are very busy for sure. I had quite a few things I was doing outside of school. So I was in 2 sports teams. I was in like the Premier water polo team during the summer, and then the Premier soccer, like football team, during the winter. So no matter what season it was, I always had trainings, like sometimes early morning, sometimes after school. I did a bit of volunteering at a hospital as well in the later part of the year, just to see exactly what that was like, because I didn't really have any idea of what a medical career looked like Like none of my family's in medicine or anything like that. So there are a lot of things that kept me busy. Also a prefect at school, so that kept me fairly busy. It was a packed schedule for sure.
Can you tell me a bit about the volunteering experience?
Yeah.
Was that during year 12 or 13?
Year 13.
13.
Yeah. So basically, I guess me and my friend who was also going for medicine, we just didn't really have much of an idea about what exactly that looked like. And also, if you're going for like the UK or US and things like that, it's good to have done a bit of volunteering just to show that you have that idea of what medical schools are like. Because especially in the UK, they look quite a bit into what you've done just outside of your academics.
So you were applying to the UK Med as well?
Yeah, because my dad lives in London.
Yeah.
So I thought it'd be a good idea if I can try going up there.
So can you tell me a little bit more about that actual volunteering experience, what that was like?
So neither me and my friends, who were both going for medicine in Australia and also the UK, really had much idea about what the career really involved. His dad was a doctor, but I had no one in my family that was in medicine. So I think I wanted a bit of experience in a hospital itself, just seeing what that's like. And for the UK, it is actually quite an important part of your applications, having a bit of things outside of your academics, being a bit more well-rounded is what they look at for an applicant. And especially volunteering, like working experience, is something they particularly look into. Like some universities will like specifically say they want you to have work experience, things like that. So that stressed me out a little bit. But it helps that my friend had his dad that worked in one of these private hospitals. That definitely helped. But we reached out to the hospital. We just emailed them kind of through our school as well. We got our school to help us out a bit. We managed to organize it so that like every second Thursday, I think it was, we went in after school and just were in the hospital, just actually shadowing nurses mostly.
Oh, okay.
I think that was quite a good experience because I guess I got to see more about the healthcare team in general. Especially for interviews, it was nice to be able to say that I shadowed someone that wasn't a doctor necessarily. I just had an idea about the healthcare team in general. And I got a lot of respect for nurses and the role they provide in hospital, and ended up getting quite close with a few of them, like chatting all the time. In the hospital, I didn't do much. I really just walked around chatting to people and asking them about what exactly they did.
Practical stuff while in the hospital?
No, not at all. I literally just walked around, talked to nurses. I like handed out some meals and things like that at dinner time, but I didn't do particularly much. But I just really enjoyed getting to talk to patients and getting to talk to nurses and hear their experience, and the occasional doctor as well. So it's definitely something I'd recommend because it gave me a lot more of a holistic idea about what medicine as a career is like, but also what the healthcare profession is like as well, and working within a hospital. And obviously a private hospital is quite different to a public hospital.
Yes.
But still it was worth having that experience, yeah.
Okay. So from that, just leading into more like why medicine kind of... Why did you decide that you didn't want to be a nurse having shadowed nurses? Like what led you more towards medicine? It sounds a little bit like an MMI question, but what led you more towards medicine?
Yeah, I think this is obviously one I thought about a bit after that kind of experience, but I think it's also that overall kind of duty of care that doctors will have over patients. Obviously nurses have an important role in that too, but it's the ultimate like decision making and duty of care that I thought I'd really enjoy. Especially kind of that like diagnosis and treatment aspect, and I guess having a role in taking the lead in that process, I thought was something I'd really enjoy. And especially I shadowed like a surgeon for part of that as well. I didn't get to go into surgery, but I got to have a chat to him. That was something I was really interested in. So I think that's what led me more towards potentially medicine rather than nursing. But as I said, I got like a really adept kind of respect for nurses after that shadowing.
Okay. And have you maintained that desire to go into surgery still? Is that still something you're interested in?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I did my placement this year in Mildura,
right?
For a week in year 2. You get to do your placement. And I was actually on general surgery for my placement, and I really enjoyed that rotation. Just getting to see like the inside of actually a surgery, and talking to the patients before they go in, and getting to see that whole process was really cool. And so definitely something I'm still interested in. But equally, I know a lot of people that would have thought they were interested in one thing and already are like, no, that's not the thing.
You learn so much seeing it. Like face value.
Yeah.
Actually seeing it in practice.
Mm.
I was in general surgery as well in my placement.
Mm.
Thought about that, and it was just so cool to see each step. And I had the experience of, I spoke to the anaesthetist in there, and I was super fortunate that he was really welcoming and said, "Oh, come in. I want to show you all of the the cool stuff in the drawer and show you how like I'm going to do this." And I do think that in deciding later down the track, like what specialty you might do, has a big it leverages a lot on not only what you're interested in, but also who the people are that support you on the way. So I'm really glad you had that experience with shadowing both nurses and a surgeon. You did mention UK med, so that's a big deal to go all the way over there. And I don't know very much about the UK system. Obviously, there's the big names like Cambridge and Oxford and things like that. But why UK med and not just Australia or even New Zealand as well?
Yeah, I guess we can go through each of them and my thinking behind my applications. We start off with New Zealand, I guess. The New Zealand system's a bit different. You have to do a year of university first before you can apply to medicine.
Right.
And there's very much, I'm not sure if it's a misconception because I'm not doing it, but everyone thinks that pathway is like impossibly hard. Like, I only know of maybe a couple people that have got in from my year group at school. And so you have to go for that first year of university, maintain really high kind of grades and GPA. You'll have to sit the UCAT as well. And then you can apply for either Auckland or Otago. So there's only two options within New Zealand. And there's 300 or so spots for each. So it is very competitive. And I thought, if I can get into Australia just from high school and, work through that process and then avoid everything there, then that would be a good idea, especially because Australia is close to home and I knew quite a lot about it already. With the UK, as I said, my dad lived there, so that was kind of a key part of choosing the UK. I also grew up in the UK for a few years. Like I was born there, I lived there for 5 years, so I have a bit of a connection to the UK as well. Definitely somewhere I'd consider like going to at some point. So I thought it'd be worth applying there too. But that process is definitely kind of very rigorous. There's lots of extra steps you have to take compared to applying to Australian medicine.
Okay. And did you apply to those big kind of Cambridge Oxford ones, or is it the other?
Yeah, good question. For the Cambridge, Oxford, like Imperial College, UCL, all the kind of big name universities in the UK, not only do you have to do the UCAT, but you also have to sit the BMAT.
Right.
So the BMAT is almost a little bit like the GAMSAT, which is the postgraduate one. It's a lot more like content based. It's a lot more about like sciencey stuff and a bit more about the like actual medicine kind of content, whereas the UCAT's a bit weird where it's more just about like skills and testing you really. But that BMAT test is in November and there's only like from memory, there's only like 1 or 2 dates they give. So like you have to do it then in November, which is right in the middle of all your exams and everything. I was like, I don't know if that's something I'm really willing to take on because that could kind of affect my school results. But outside of that, there's a lot of universities in the UK that don't require the BMAT, which are the ones I ended up applying to. So for those, you just have to submit an application to UCAS, which is the broad admission centre for the whole of the UK. So you can only apply for 4 medical schools when you apply for the UK, which is a bit different. So you have to kind of hand select which ones those are. You submit an application through there. You have to do a personal statement, which is quite important. Universities will take that into account when they look into your application. So I spent a bit of time writing that as well. But then they'll just use your UCAT and your school grades along with that application to judge whether you'll get an interview or not. So in some ways it's similar to the Australian system, but there's a few kind of additives in that process.
Okay.
Yeah.
So obviously you've in Monash now, you've been in for a year and a half. Were you successful with any of the other unis, either in the UK or in Australia? Like, was there a decision, or was the Monash the only one that you had the opportunity to go to?
Yeah, there was a bit of a decision. I mean, between Australia and the UK, that came first because the UK medical schools don't start until September. So, like the Monash and the Australian ones start a bit earlier in like February, March. So I had to make that decision early because, if I chose not to go to the Australian ones, I was fully committed to going to the UK. And the UK interviews were around the same time that I would have been starting in Australia. Right. They were in like March time. And I did have a few of those. I think I had like 3 interviews in the UK. but I hadn't done those by the time I'd got an offer from Monash and UNSW, were the two I got into here. So I think by that point I was like, is it worth taking the risk? What if I defer my offer from Australia and then I don't get into the UK and then I've just got a year where I'm not really doing much. So I decided at that point to take Monash. Also, the fees going to the UK as an international student are pretty hefty, whereas here in Australia, New Zealanders are considered a domestic student. So we just pay domestic fees, which is quite handy. That was a big decision as well. And then it just became between Monash and UNSW. To be honest, I didn't really know much about that decision. Like, I was literally just going off it. UNSW is like an extra year, basically.
Right, it is.
And I also really liked Melbourne, so that was a lot of that decision, to be honest.
Awesome. And that friend that you spoke about in high school, did he end up going through medical school as well?
Yeah. So he's in the University of Sydney into their like guaranteed entry into their postgraduate medicine pathway. So that's a pretty excellent job. It's a very competitive pathway, that one. Because it's like a 99.95 ATAR one. We like just have to get that to get an interview, and then I think about 30 people get the guaranteed entry. So he did a really excellent job as well. Obviously very proud of him. Worked out for both of us in the end.
Awesome. Well, congratulations on that. And I'm in your course, so I'm very glad you made that decision to go on it as well. Moving back to high school a little bit, can you tell me a bit about how you kind of approached your studies in the context of subjects as well? So can you tell me a bit about what subjects you did and then how you approached each one of them?
Yeah, I think funnily enough, I didn't decide I wanted to do medicine until about March or February of my year 13. So it was a very late decision, mostly because I didn't really know about what medicine was, or I never really thought about it as an option until then. It's quite funny how I guess that became an option for me. I was at like a parent-teacher interview thing with one of my biology teachers. They're like, "Oh, what do you think about doing for next year?" I was like, "Oh, I just really don't know," and all this stuff. And I was basically saying that I really enjoyed the sciences, but I didn't really want to do an office job. I wanted to do something that was a bit more hands-on, and liked working with people, all stuff like that. And she was like, "Oh, Jonty, you just have to do medicine. Like, you're literally just saying it to me." So I was like, "Oh, it's a really good point." So that's why that ended up happening. In terms of subjects, because of that, there wasn't a lot of thought about like, oh, which one should I do to get in and stuff to maximize my chances, because I didn't know I was going to. So I guess I was almost lucky in a way, because I was taking like biology, chemistry, physics, I did maths, I did geography, but those are mostly just like the subjects I enjoyed. So I was just lucky that I was kind of meeting the prerequisites without knowing. So in terms of subject selection, there wasn't so much a thought. But yeah, I'm just glad the whole process worked out without me kind of knowing. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. So in your year 12 year, so before you move into year 13, did you accelerate any subjects at all? Is that something that they offered?
Yeah. The only subject they let you do that with at my school anyway was maths.
Okay.
So for A level, like I know here you've got like the spec methods, general maths, like there's a few different types. For Cambridge A levels, there's just AS level, which is what you do. Well, there's IG level, which is what you do in your New Zealand year 11. So I did that in year 10, so I did a year ahead. Then there's AS maths, which is the next step, which I did in year 11 rather than year 12. And so I did A level maths, which is like the year 13 maths in year 12. The whole point of that program is that you can then go on to do like further maths, which is like the next step. If you want to kind of, I guess, go above and beyond with your A-level maths. But I just didn't think it would be particularly useful for me, just because I didn't think I was going to do any degree that was very heavy on maths. It wasn't something I particularly enjoyed. So then I ended up picking up physics in my year 13 instead of doing the next step in maths. But I did accelerate that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, further maths in...
I know, yeah.
Like the sort of continuation of general.
Yeah.
And not the sort of specialist high level one. So that interesting difference. Was there one subject that you enjoyed more than others?
Yeah, this is part of my decision to go into medicine as well. I really enjoyed the A-level biology course. And part of the reason for that was there was a few topics specifically I really enjoyed, which was we did like the respiratory system, we did like the cardiovascular system, we did a bit about like infectious diseases. So it was really all the medicine topics without knowing that I really enjoyed. And then once I worked that out, I was like, oh wow, like if this is the stuff that's in a medicine degree, then that's what I want to do, definitely.
Particularly if you've got someone saying like, oh, you're interested in this.
Yeah, exactly. And my biology teacher was really good with helping me work that out, and she actually helped me a bit with the applications. She knew a bit about it, so yeah, that was definitely a lot about what I enjoyed in high school.
Right. If you were to give a particular suggestion or tip to a student who's thinking about their subject selection, I know VC is a little bit different, but I think that the same advice applies. How would you kind of phrase that advice to them? What would be one tip that you would give?
I mean, if you're very set on medicine, obviously make sure you're meeting the prerequisites. So for a lot of universities, if you want to keep your options open, like methods, chem, English are important. So bio isn't necessarily needed, but I think it's helpful, just like the course itself going into medicine. Because, for example, at Monash, I'm sure you remember, like if you hadn't done bio, you had to do a bit of a bridging course, and it was quite tricky, I'm sure. Did you?
I did do the bridging course.
Yeah.
Mostly.
Yeah.
But the like in the first maybe 4 or 5 weeks, we'd covered all of the content from year 13 biology, like A-level and VCE biology. So it was quite intense in the start.
Yeah, exactly. So if you want to avoid that and you enjoy biology, then, absolutely take it. Outside of the prerequisite subjects, I mean, I'm just a big believer in do what you enjoy. I'm not a believer in picking a subject just because you think it's going to be easier if you don't enjoy it. Because at the end of the day, I think you're going to work harder in something that you enjoy, and therefore you'll get better grades. But that's just one opinion, of course, my opinion. But that's like what I did with, for example, geography. Was probably the subject I consistently did the best in. And that wasn't, partly because it was maybe slightly easier of a subject, but also because I actually just really enjoyed it and I enjoyed studying it. Whereas like history was one that like I thought about taking because I thought I could do well in, but I also really hated essay writing, and it's all about essay writing. So I didn't end up doing that. So it's just weighing up, I guess, like, being able to receive the grades you want, but also I think it's really important that you do something you enjoy.
It's a tough balance to strike. I had a friend in high school who chose all of his subjects purely for scaling. And he sort of felt like every single day it was a bit of a slog. And then another one chose subjects that I don't think any of them scaled bar one, but just loves it. Like it was actually all of the essay writing subjects. It was sort of a literature and a history and a English, and just loved essay writing and did really, really well. So I find it's a tough balance to strike. But I'm guessing physics and sort of the maths were your more scaly subjects, is that right? Was it similar to scaling in VCE?
It's a little bit different. There wasn't like you didn't know what your scaling was. It was just automatically added onto your scores. So with your scores in A-levels, you just get a percentage for each subject, and then you get an overall grade. So the system goes like A star for 90% or above scaled, A, B, C, just going down like 10% each time. So obviously the more A stars you can get for like admissions and stuff, the better. So like I remember there were these graphs you could check to like check the scaling, but they didn't tell you what your raw score was. So for example, I know that chemistry scaled like a lot. Like it was like 68 or 69 or 70% for an A star. So it scaled like 20%. But the exams are pretty tricky. So I can see why that is.
Okay. And looking back on your subjects, do you have any particular regrets or anything you would have changed, like on the other side of your year 13?
Yeah, not particularly. I really enjoyed a lot of the subjects I did. Like biology, chemistry, I always enjoyed, and they ended up being, I think, my best results. Same with geography. I just really enjoyed and ended up being my best results. I wish English wasn't a prerequisite because I really didn't like English, but I still did okay in that. I think my biggest regret would be that maths pathway I talked about, and accelerating that from the start, because I really didn't like maths, and so that was kind of a slog every single year, especially because I was doing it a year early. It just made it way more difficult for me and stressful. Whereas if I'd just not done the accelerated pathway and done that in year 13, I think I would have done a lot better. That was a subject I did by far the worst, and because I did it a year ahead, and I found that quite tricky. So that would be my only regret. But in total, I was pretty happy with how it all went.
One of the pieces of advice I was given by a teacher regarding an accelerated subject was that it's not about the score that you get, but more so the learning you get from the subject, learning a bit about what it is to do like a final year subject, or learn some study skills, or learn how you kind of study. Was that your experience with that subject? You said it wasn't your best, but do you feel like you got something out of it for your final year?
Yeah, for sure. Especially in year 10. So year 10 in New Zealand is just like completely school by school run. That's before NCEA starts, or like Cambridge A levels. But I got to do the IGCSE subject a year ahead. So I had some experience of doing those final year exams, which are obviously pretty stressful.
I did the IGCSE English in
really, yeah,
year 10.
Yeah. So I got experience of doing those final exams, which are pretty stressful because it's 100% of your grade on those end exams. So having a bit of experience doing that and the preparation leading into that was definitely a good experience to have going into my actual like IGCSEs in year 11. So I agree with that, actually. I think that gave me some good preparation. Okay.
So regarding how you approached each of those subjects, so you got some math subjects, which you did a little bit early, a lot of science, and of course geography and English is one that you didn't like as much. How did your study approach differ between those subjects?
Yeah, I think it's very important to tailor your study to each subject. For example, maths, I was just all about just questions. Like I would read over maybe like the example question or like the methods of doing a question, but I just keep doing those questions until I could just do them like quickly and I was used to them. I can definitely remember some nights where I'd just be sitting there like looking at a question for about 40 minutes, just having no idea. But it's almost like that's part of the process. Like by sitting there and being so frustrated by it, and then when I finally work it out, or then when I go and watch a YouTube video on how to do it, then it really sticks because you like had that experience. So I think maths, I was all about like just doing as much practice as you can. I was really against writing notes for pretty much all of my subjects, which was, I guess, quite controversial and something I take into university as well. I really don't like writing notes just because I feel like the time I spend writing notes isn't the best use of my time. I'm not saying notes aren't useful. I think they really are. But for me, it was more that like the time I spent writing them versus doing other things, I felt like I could make more use of my time doing other things. So the only subject I really wrote notes for was geography. That was because we had like case studies for different things. So I think it was worth writing notes out for that, to have them there and be able to read over them and revise them. Otherwise, my study approach for all the science subjects like biology, chemistry, physics, was again a lot about just repetitive practice. So obviously we'd have like homework each night or whatever, and so I'd always make sure I did that. But then also just practicing where I could in the weekends. We had like tests and stuff, so I'd always prepare very well for those. Not only because I wanted to do well on the test. They weren't that important for A-levels because obviously it doesn't make up your grade. But I just prepared for those well, more so that you've done that practice and solidified it in your head so that by the time you come back to it at the end of the year, you already have an idea about what you're doing. So similar to the maths, I was just really about doing as much practice and repetitive practice as you can. And that way I felt that I didn't have to write notes. And if I needed to touch up on something, I could just, read part of a textbook or something like that. And especially for exam study, all I did was just either read over some notes if I didn't get something, or read over some textbook like if I didn't get anything, and then just like do practice exams, practice questions. And I would suck at the practice exams when I first started them, but then over the month or so preparing for exams, by the end it's just like clockwork. You've just done so many of them that you get used to it.
Yeah, and you can be grateful for the first exam that you did. You can thank yourself for putting yourself through that. Oh, I got 30% in this one, just because it gets that ball rolling and you experience that a bit. No, that's really interesting on notes. I feel like I've found that as well, not only through high school, but going into university, is that you spend all this time writing these notes, and maybe it's for some subjects, maybe it's not. And then how much do you really look back on them?
Yeah.
I think that there are some techniques that you can use to look back on notes and maybe retrieve them a little bit, write flashcards from them, but really retrieving the information and applying to the exam is how, at the end of the day, how you're going to do well. So it's good advice to, I don't know, maybe students like using notes, maybe they don't, but it's worth a try, I guess, to try both. So with those study habits in place and looking back on them, much like your subjects and how we spoke about, would you change any of them? Is there anything that you would have done differently looking back now?
It's a good question. I think one of the other big things I did was, especially leading into exams or if there was a big test or something coming up, the really important thing I think to do is to manage your time, obviously, but work backwards from it. So if you have an exam in a month, you look at that exam, you break it down to each component. So I'd literally get the syllabus up and I'd be like, okay, this is what I have to cover in the next month or two for my study. So I'd break out each of those components of the exam. I'd sit there and I'd be like, how much time do I realistically think I have to dedicate to each of these components? To be like, 6 hours for this, 5 hours for that, whatever. And I set out all my time. And then from there, you have a gross sum of time you have to spend studying for that subject. And then you just work backwards and go, I have this many days. So if it's 40 hours across 25 days, then, you can divide that up. My maths isn't really there for that at the moment. But yeah, you divide it up between the days. You need to do this many hours. And then you actually make a timetable and you go putting in all the hours for each subject. And that way you know exactly how much you have to do to get where you want to be. But you also know when you're doing it. So if, you're messing around watching YouTube or something instead of doing that, that, that's going to sacrifice that 1 hour that I was meant to do doing exactly this. It's like,
and then I've got to make up for it.
Yeah, it's like exactly what you're missing out on instead of just going like, I probably should have done some study. Like, that's not as effective as, I missed out on doing the infectious diseases part of biology. Like, now I have to make time for that. So I would 100% recommend that. And I didn't get onto that until like my last year of high school probably. And if I'd done that earlier, then I think I would have been more successful with my time, my grades. But yeah, I can't think of anything, honestly, I would have changed too much. I was pretty happy with my system and how it worked for me. Yeah.
So besides the occasional YouTube, procrastinating,
yeah.
What happened to that schedule when there was something that popped up that you couldn't avoid? When there was an afternoon where you just felt absolutely trashed, or maybe there was a family event on, or some unforeseen circumstance? How did you adjust your study schedule for that?
I think that's like more common than you think. Like I feel like there's probably at least once a week, twice a week,
if not more.
If not more, where I'd be like, I can't be bothered right now. Like I've got this on. I've just done this. Like I can't be bothered. And I think that's definitely something you have to factor in, and don't feel guilty for it. I had set time commitments like throughout the week, like trainings and things like that. So quite often I'd get home pretty late. But I think having those commitments, I'm a big advocate for when you're more busy, you're going to make better use of your time, because you know that if you don't do something exactly when you have the time, then you're not going to get it done because you're busy. Whereas if you're less busy, like, you've got heaps of time, so then you're more likely to procrastinate. So I actually think being busy isn't a bad thing at all. But also, like, take care of yourself and know that some nights you're just not going to feel like doing some study. So, like, I'd come home from training some days and just be exhausted. Like, I just had dinner and I just wanted to, like, chill out and, like, not do anything. And it got to the point where I was actually like, that's okay. Like, if you're really tired, I can actually remember some times where I was doing, like, a past paper or something and I fell asleep with my head, like, on the paper. And, like, that's not doing you any good. Like, that is doing you zero good. So it's like, you'd rather spend that time doing something you enjoy and feeling refreshed for the next day than forcing yourself to do some study that is not going to be effective, and you're getting literally nothing out of that. You're going to feel just as exhausted the next day.
Yep.
And, what have you really achieved? So that's definitely the big thing to keep in mind.
Yeah, right. I remember some nights where I sort of read a paragraph 5 times and you go, wait, what did I just...
Yeah.
When you kind of having that self-reflection and going, okay, what's the point that I'm reaching where I need to sort of need to stop. And I think falling asleep on the page is a pretty clear sign that you at the end. I think like one of the things that people speak about with high achieving students in particular is there's kind of this perception that I don't want to use the word invulnerable necessarily, but that they just seem to do everything easily, that everything's cruisy. And for you to say that there are nights where it's not it. And you don't have it in you is really great, because the whole like final years of school is really busy. And when circumstances pop up, whether it be extracurricular, family, or you're just really tired, it's good to have that, those moments of self-care. And I want to touch on self-care in a second. But to wrap up our discussion around study habits and study skills, is there one particular tip that you would give to students who are going through those final years of school, or even earlier as well, that would help with their study habits?
Yeah, I think that thing I said about just planning backwards, it's hard to plan forwards. Like, it's hard to know, like, oh, I need to do, I use the example of infectious diseases for bio. It's like, when are you ever going to randomly think you just need to study that if you hadn't looked at the exam, planned out exactly the different components, allocated time, worked back, put it in your schedule? Like, you have to do all of that first before you have an effective kind of study routine. Now, I'm not saying I did that for every single like SAC or test or everything. Like, I wasn't that organized, but definitely for the exam period, just, a couple months beforehand, trying to work out how much time you actually are needing to study for, and then working out how many days that's realistically going to take you. And then you know exactly when you need to start studying to reach your goal. But you also know what you need to study when. So it's not only, time management and studying, when you should be studying, but it's knowing exactly what you should be doing that I think was effective for me. Yeah.
So, Jonty, you briefly mentioned self-care in regards to the study habits as well. So I'm interested to hear a little bit about what that looked like for you in those final years of school.
I think I'll almost break this down into general self-care and exam self-care.
Okay.
I feel like during exam season, that's like a whole different beast. General self-care, I feel like, honestly, the sports trainings were really good for me because it forced me to just have some time where I was just like, playing sport, like chatting to my mates and just disconnecting from any study or any academics. So while sometimes I found it a chore, a lot of the time I actually really appreciated that time of stepping away, especially because it was usually like after school. So I'd finish up a day of, studying or school and stuff like that. And then I'd just be able to go and, kick a soccer ball and, with my mates. And yeah, I found that a nice way to step away from study for a bit. So that was never something I tried to get rid of during the year.
Water polo training is notoriously early. Did you have early
yes
as well?
Yeah, and my school did have a pool, which we're very lucky to have, but it was outdoor.
Oh.
So training in winters was pretty rough. Getting up at like 5. I was lucky enough to be able to drive to school. But then, getting in the pool at like 5:30 was
outside as well.
In the winter was pretty rough. The pool would be like steaming like everywhere and stuff. So that was, the morning trainings were difficult because I may be pretty tired for the rest of the day. But the afternoon trainings I really enjoyed, just having that time to step away. And then, even though that meant I got home and then I'd have dinner, have a bit of a chat to my family, which I also enjoyed. But then after that, I had like 2 hours or so before I'd kind of start getting ready for bed, where I'd be studying. I was also a big advocate for, and I'm not sure if this is just because I get really tired late at night, and I'm just a person that can't study late at night. I was a very big advocate for past like 9:30, 10, I was like done with study. Like, no matter what, I'm done. So that was also a part of self-care, where like the half an hour or hour before bed, I'd always just leave that for kind of doing my own thing. That helped me wind down for sleep, and I feel like it's a good way to break up study from sleeping as well.
Okay. And in the exam context, were there any other specific things that you put in place in terms of preparation or eating habits, exercise? I mean, water polo and soccer are both very exercise heavy. Like, you're definitely keeping up your fitness in those sports as well. Was there anything else that alongside that?
Yeah, well, as you say, as I said before, exam season's obviously a bit different because I didn't necessarily have those trainings to break up my day.
Yes.
So it was very easy to slip into a day where you just wake up, study, and that's about it. And like, maybe have a bit of YouTube or Netflix or something, but you've really done nothing other than just like going between maybe 2 rooms in my house. So exam season was a bit different. One thing which I did in my final year of high school, which was really good, is me and my friends would organize to play soccer with each other. So we ended up getting about like 15, 16 people out sometimes and just playing a big like 8-a-side game on this local soccer pitch. And like, again, that'd be something I'd just factor into my day. I'm just like, I need that time to just chill out. No matter if I'm stressed with my study and I'm not sure if I'm going to make the, deadline to do this different study I want to do, but it's like, you just need that time. Because at the end of the day, that's going to make your study more effective. It's like, I'm going to study better if I know that I've got this thing I can look forward to later in the day. So I'd usually have it in the afternoon. We go like kick around the ball. And because I had that, I knew that if I didn't start my study, I was going to have that and then I wouldn't be started until later in the day. But also B, it meant that the study I did was just more effective because I was like trying to get it done because I knew I had this thing I was looking forward to. So I think, as I said, being busy and having things on isn't necessarily a bad thing. I think it's actually a good way of motivating yourself. So during exam season, I'd also keep it even more strict. So like 9:30, like study done. Like I'd put down whatever I was doing and I'd be done. And like, I mean, I'd like, especially during the lockdown, I'd like hop on with my friends on like PlayStation or something and just like, you know, that was my way of relaxing for the evening. Or if it was going to just talk to my family for a few hours before bed. Just having that time before sleep and knowing I had that time to chill out also helped motivate me because it was like, if it was 8:30 and it was, you know, going tough with study, it's like, oh, I've got, you know, an hour left, just another bit and I can chill out. So just setting those boundaries between study, having time to chill out, but then also, you know, the exercise and seeing friends, I think is something you still want to keep during your exam season. And I think having that balance will actually help motivate you as well. So, yeah.
So moving on a little bit from the self-care habits that you just spoken about, which I think are super duper important and super helpful as well. What was the UCAT like in your year 12 year? Because obviously that's a part of your year in what I suppose preparation can start as early as maybe January or earlier, but the actual testing month is June through to August, I think. So how did that fit into your year 13 year?
Yeah, it was interesting because, as I said, the New Zealand system, you do the UCAT and you apply for medicine from university in your first year. So no one knows about it or thinks about it until then, really. So I had no idea what the UCAT was. No one had talked to me about it. I had no idea until I got to year 13. And as I said, I didn't even decide I wanted to do medicine until early in my year 13. So it was only when I started looking into it that I discovered the UCAT. And it was lucky that I had my friend with me as well. That kind of helped to motivate me. But I didn't start studying for the UCAT until kind of March, April of my year 13. And I thought I'd plenty of time. Like I thought I was perfectly fine. I had, you know, months to prepare. But it's funny, since I've come here, I've seen how like early people start thinking about it. Especially like with my job at Contour as well. Like obviously there's a lot of younger students in the program. And I see how, I guess, not seriously, but how competitive it is, like doing the whole UCAT process and how much people think about the medicine program. Whereas like, I just had no idea. Like no one knows about it really, unless you look into it. So I was lucky that I had my mate there and we kind of bounced off each other, motivated each other. We competed with each other a little bit, like, which was quite healthy. So for the UCAT preparation, again, I just recommend having a question bank or something. If you can choose to do tutoring, obviously. I mean, I personally didn't. If you want to be like 100% sure and you want to know all the strategies and stuff and you want to have that preparation, then obviously tutoring can be a good option. But again, I just didn't really know there was tutoring even for the UCAT. So I just had a question bank I'd Medify, which I worked through. And same thing for like my mentality towards my subjects. It was just grinding as much practice, like especially timed practice, under like those exam conditions as I could. I even like went to my grandma's house because she had like a monitor and like the mouse keyboard setup, which I didn't have in my house, to like get the full practice on like exam conditions. So I definitely recommend that. And that was a lot of what my preparation was. But I also think with the UCAT, what's quite good about it, because it's like multi-choice, and especially with those question banks, which are just accessible online, I just kind of do bits here or there when I had the time. So like study, we had to sit down and get your books out and stuff like that. So like we had free periods at school sometimes, or if I was on the train or something, I'd just like, you know, do a few questions here or there. You know, just do like a 12-minute or 15-minute abstract reasoning practice, however long that is.
I've forgotten how long.
Yeah, I've forgotten how long that section is. I just remember it was very short. So you can just fit it in where you can. Of course, I said I was pretty busy, so I just fit it in where I could. But then I'd also dedicate, I think it was Saturdays, for like the last couple months leading into the UCAT. Saturdays were just like my UCAT day. Like awesome. That was it. I just did like practice exam, and thoroughly look over it as well. There's no use doing a practice exam if you don't know what you did wrong and don't learn from what you did wrong. So I feel like looking over your exams thoroughly and working out how you do the questions is a big part of it. Like, I feel like I almost had 50-50 between doing the exam and actually looking over it in terms of time. So it does take a while, like that whole process. But yeah, that's my biggest advice, just doing as much practice as you can, setting out time to do it within your schedule, definitely.
Okay. And how was your actual UCAT testing experience? I mean, not knowing much about it, what was it like walking in?
Yeah, I think, again, I didn't really understand the scores I had to get. Like, I thought if I got like 2 800s, 2 900s, that I'd be fine. But in my position, that actually probably wouldn't have been fine. But I just had no idea. And I think that was almost good. I was like a lot less stressed going into the exam day because maybe I wasn't aware of how much like importance there was. So I ended up performing quite a lot better on my exam day than I expected, which obviously looking back on, I'm very grateful for. But with any exam, I think my biggest advice on exam day is don't study on the exam day. Really don't. Even the night before, like, keep it minimal. Just look over a few key things maybe in the morning or the night before, but don't go and do like practice questions and things like that, because the night before, if you go ahead and do a practice exam and you do really badly, that's just going to really stress you out. So I feel like that's really key. And then on the day, obviously, you just want to be fresh going into your exam. So I'd recommend doing it like maybe in the morning or early afternoon, just so you're not thinking about it the whole day, and so you don't like want to practice in the morning or something. Because that's what I did. And went in, and the testing center experience was fine. It was just like an office, really. I just like had a computer, and it was a bit daunting with everyone else around you doing it.
Good, like pods.
Yeah. So that was a little bit daunting in some ways, and I actually really screwed up my first section, like verbal reasoning. I remember sitting there like, I'm done. I've screwed it up. Like, chat, am I cooked? Like, I was like, I'm done here. But I think just no matter what happens, just go like, I've still got this. Like, just back yourself. So after that first section, I knew I screwed it up, but I was like, I've got 3 sections to go. Like, I'm just gonna smash them. Good. And luckily, that's what happened. I really smashed those last 3 sections, and so I ended up doing okay. But just try as best as you can to not stress yourself out during the exam. You can be stressed out after the exam, that's fine, but like during the exam, just be like, okay, that's fine, that's done, that section's over, now we focus on this one. Like, I think that's a big piece of advice, definitely. Yeah.
Just lock in. I barely remember my exam.
Yeah, it was such a blur.
It's such a blur.
Yeah.
I do, well, okay, that's not entirely true. I do remember vividly, similar to you finishing verbal reasoning and being like, oh, I'm not sure about that. But you've got that minute, 2 minutes?
Yeah.
Is it a minute? I think.
Yeah.
However long. To sit there and go, okay, that doesn't matter anymore. It's past. I can't change it. I've got to do the next one.
Exactly.
And that's great that you were able to lock in. But yeah, it can be really daunting when those thoughts start to creep in. You're like, oh wait, I'm not gonna do well. I'm not gonna get into medicine. Like all of this sort of stuff. And then that applies to VC as well, where you have one bad exam, but it's like, okay, I've done chem, well, not just VC, but also your experience as well. Like, I've left chem behind. Now I need to worry about whatever ones I have left. I've left maths behind. It's okay. I've got more to deal with. So that's
especially with the UCAT, where I think verbal reasoning unanimously for most people is probably the most difficult section.
Yes.
And you have that first, so just know that, like, look, this is probably going to be my hardest section, but it's going to go uphill from there. I think it's important to keep in mind for the exam day.
So, Jonty, you mentioned a little bit about not knowing what the UCAT was. That is a bit daunting, and I feel like my experience in Victoria was that it was just so heard about, and particularly if you're doing tutoring as well, in a place like Contour, everyone around you knows what the UCAT is. There's all this talk about it. Were there any other misconceptions or like wives' tales sort of things about medicine and that came up? Anything like that? Yeah,
there were definitely a few. I think the first one is that, like, getting to medicine is like impossible. That was the one I came across so much in my final couple of years of high school. Like, the same kind of teachers that would help me with my applications would also kind of be like, oh, look, like realistically it's impossible. Like, it's probably not going to happen. So I was actually like under the opinion, like, oh, I'm probably not getting in. It's really competitive. Like, that's it for me, really.
It's nice for them to give you some hope. That's
yeah, no, I actually had a teacher say to me, like, like don't bother. Like
Don't bother.
going for Australian medicine and just try for it in New Zealand. But then I was like, oh, like I might as well try. And like I had done some research online. I was like, oh, it doesn't look impossible. Like it looks somewhat doable. So that was definitely the big misconception. I think it's also that a lot of New Zealanders don't like that would go for medicine don't know about the option in Australia and the fact that you can go for it from high school. Like,
Right.
I mean, I wasn't aware of that until I kind of looked into it with my friend and we worked that out. But I know someone who didn't go through that process in high school, found out about me and my friend getting in like in my year, and then they were like, oh wait, I would have done that, like that's annoying, like I would have gone for that, and they ended up getting in New Zealand, so that was fine. But yeah, it's like A, people don't really know it's an option, but also B, if they do, they just think it's kind of impossible. But I mean, my thought is like, why not give it a go? Like I was just like I don't care what they say, I'm gonna try and go for it and just see what happens, and if it doesn't, then I'm happy with, just staying in New Zealand or going for other options. So I think it's also important to not have the mentality that it's like do or die, like medicine or nothing. Like I feel like explore your backup options, like know what else there is, know that, there's postgraduate entry, there's other ways to get into medicine, but also like look into other careers, look into other things. Like don't just have the narrow mindset that like medicine or nothing. Obviously, we're medical students. I love medicine, but yeah, I think it's that mindset of like do or die as well, which is pretty unhelpful going to applications and stuff. Yeah.
It is super easy to sit here and go, oh, like don't have that do or die attitude. Like I feel like I've called myself saying that sometimes, and it's much easier to say on the other side of the fence.
Oh, absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
But it is good advice. Like you said, that there are other ways to get into medicine. There's postgrad in New Zealand. You've got that year of time where you can do the UCAT in university, where you've honestly got more time than doing it in your final years of school. So there are options, and maybe you do an undergraduate in science or something that you actually find you enjoy more, and later down the track, if you still want to do medicine, you can. That's good advice. So the final aspect of medicine entry for most universities, I suppose, and particularly for Monash, given that that's where you are, was the MMI, and that's would have been December or January for you. How was that experience?
Well, it was quite the process getting my interview. My experience was quite unique getting the interview. There was a whole like issue with my results not being sent to the Australian university, so like they didn't have them, and then I was being told that like I literally rang Monash up because it was past their interview dates that I saw online. I was like, oh hey, like I haven't heard anything, like am I getting an interview, like what's happening? And they said like no, like oh, sorry, like the interview dates have passed, like best of luck with the rest of your applications, you're not getting an interview, which I was fine with. I obviously was a bit disappointed, but I'd moved on from that. But then eventually I find out that my results hadn't been properly sent to them, and so that was the whole process, making sure they were. And then eventually I got a UNSW interview, which I didn't realize was in person. So I had to go to Sydney with my mum to do that interview. And then funnily enough, while I was in Sydney and I just finished the interview, I was like, oh, it went really well. And I mean, the UNSW one's like a panel interview. So you have a couple interviewers which will just interview you the whole time. And I quite enjoyed that interview because you get to just talk to the same interviewers the whole time. I felt that interview went quite well. I was just chatting with my mum and I get a call and it's Monash and they're like, hey, can you interview tomorrow?
It's the same day as your UNSW.
Yes, yeah, same day. So I'm in Sydney with just like my laptop and they're like, hey, can you interview tomorrow at 2 p.m? And I was like, okay, yeah, sure. And then, so I ended up doing that interview, the online MMI from my hotel room in Sydney.
Gosh, it's a good thing it wasn't in Melbourne.
Yeah, and then I ended up getting a call the next day while I was at the baggage claim coming back home that I got in. So I think I don't think I went through the normal interview rounds and stuff because of that whole debacle that happened with my grades and stuff. But yeah, the interviews themselves I found pretty okay. I felt like I was well prepared going into them. I mean, for your preparation, again, I didn't know about them, but there's plenty of like tutoring and courses you can look into if you want to have that security of having done that. For my preparation, I just did a lot of research into kind of different areas of healthcare and like issues within healthcare. For example, like the rural versus metro kind of disparity is quite often something I'll touch on. So I went into a bit of that. And then just doing lots of practice as well. Again, as I've said throughout, like just practicing under the real kind of conditions, like doing practice with my friend and doing practice with my parents, things like that, were ways I prepared. So that by the time I got to the interview, even if like my preparation didn't necessarily do too much, I just felt prepared. Like I felt ready, which is what's really important. Even if you realistically aren't, if you're confident and you feel like you know what you're doing, that's going to help you out a lot. And then the interview itself in the MMI, you rotate through a few different stations, you read some scenarios, and then you give your response after that, each with a different interviewer per station. That process was a bit different to maybe a normal interview because you don't build that kind of rapport with the interviewers. But I still found it was fine. Like I felt I'd be okay with the interview, so I wasn't too stressed out for it. Yeah.
You're actually the first person I've spoken to who did a panel interview.
Yeah, right.
And it's interesting. Even particularly in person as well. Like sometimes they'll do panel interviews online, and it's very different to the MMI.
Yeah,
because you've got maybe 20 seconds to make a really good first impression, and then you do your interview, and then that's done. Yeah. So much like the UCAT, I found with MMI, you have to have that attitude that even if one of those stations went poorly, you've got a new interviewer. You've got that new opportunity to give that last one. Go, no, I'm not going to worry about that one anymore. I've got a new opportunity. They don't know who I am. I can make a really good first impression. But the panel interview is more of a slow burn in that you can, if you can be weighed down a little bit by a mistake. Was that your experience with that panel interview?
Yeah, I remember making a bit of a slip up with something I said, and I was like, oh, I probably shouldn't have said that. Like, and that did throw me off a bit, especially because you do have the same interviews the whole time. And I remember them writing notes after I said that. I was like, oh no. Scary. But also there's the trade-off where if it's going well, like, you know, they'll kind of go off you build a bit of rapport.
You feel encouraged.
And it's like you have a bit of a conversation, whereas the MMI is very much like, here's the prompt, you read it, here's your responses, you just give them, you don't get anything back, and then you're on to the next station. Like it's quite daunting in that way, whereas panel interviews, you have a bit more of that time to talk a bit more about yourself, your motivations for medicine. You just have a bit more to talk about everything in general. So I felt like I got myself across well in the panel interview, even with the mistakes I made. Whereas like the MMI, it's a bit more hard to tell because it's just like response. Yeah.
Particularly with less than 24 hours between doing the panel interview and the MMI, that must have been quite a shock to go, oh my goodness, I'm suddenly doing this. I just felt relaxed after the panel. I would feel quite daunted.
Yeah, well, it was almost like I'd prepared for like both because I was like, you know, hoping to get both.
Awesome.
Then I didn't get the Monash offer, but then I got the UNSW, so I was preparing still, and then went to Sydney, did the panel interview, and I was feeling really like chilled out, like I'd done my interview, you know, what's done is done. But then because I got like the Monash offer on that day, I almost saw it as like a really good opportunity because it was like I wasn't expecting to have that interview. I was expecting to just have the one chance UNSW, and that was it. But then I had this really great opportunity to go for Monash as well, which I'd already kind of thought I wasn't getting. So in a way, it actually really relaxed me because I was like, I don't actually mind. Like if this doesn't go well, I've already done really well, I think, in my UNSW, and I did end up getting an offer. So yeah, I just had that security as well going into it, which I think was nice.
Brilliant. That's awesome. And yeah, congratulations on the UNSW offer as well.
Yeah, thank you.
It wasn't something you took on.
Yeah.
So to finish off our discussion today, I want to touch on a little bit your work at Contour. And you can speak to your role a little bit more than me, but you're a medical admissions advisor. So you're guiding people towards all of the complexities of medical admission. So how has that been? And run me through what it looks like day to day.
Yeah. Well, I started with Contour in November last year. And I guess the reason I really went into it was, as you say, just like helping people get into medicine, because I had such a kind of random, difficult process getting into medicine. I was like, if I can make that easier for people, that would be awesome. So I started off as a student enrollment and support advisor. So I met with people before they came into the UCAT course, just helped them out with any questions they had, just clarified what the course looks like here at Contour. And I found that was pretty good. I did that mostly over the summer, and then this role came up, and I'd already said to Ramad, who's like, you know, boss at Contour, like, oh, I really want to do like the medical admissions advising, like actually the part of kind of helping people get in. And then eventually that role opened up, and now I'm in that role. But yeah, I've really, really enjoyed it. As you say, like when you're going through that process, like it's pretty difficult trying to find questions and answers online. Like it's really tricky, and like you have to dig through so many websites to find the answers you're looking for. So like it'd be great if I could just, you know, give those answers off. And so that's, I guess, what I do now. I meet with people for about 40 or so minutes after they've finished the UCAT program, or if they've done the interview program, the mocks and stuff.
Yep.
And get 40 minutes just to chat about their scores, how the year's going. It's quite nice. You really just have a general chat with them, but then you also can help them out with specific universities to go for, and I guess just clarify a lot of questions they have. And it's really nice to see at the end that quite a lot of the time, like, oh, that's it. Like, you've really kind of helped me out and answered the questions. So it's a role where you're constantly learning because there's so much to know, obviously, but definitely one I enjoy with being able to kind of help people with that process.
And there's so much value you can offer both to the parents and the students themselves, having that clarity on, hey, I went through this. It's a really complex process, particularly. I mean, yours is one of the most complex I've heard. But it's really complex. It is competitive, and giving some peace of mind as well, some clarity is really awesome. In terms of how you feel on the other side of medical admissions, we just mentioned how complex yours was. Do you feel like it's something you want to keep doing? It's quite rewarding in that you can offer that advice?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's something I'll continue to do for at least the next couple of years for sure. And it is really rewarding knowing so much stuff that I didn't know going to application, and then being like able to pass that on so that people are more informed when they go into their applications. And at the end of the day, we'll probably have a better chance knowing where to tailor their attention at different universities and stuff. So definitely rewarding and something I'm enjoying doing.
Excellent. Well, Jonty, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you,
I've had an awesome discussion, and I really appreciate you coming in.
Cheers, Edison.